You've talked about use cases already. You brought up use cases and how the dependency on use cases, it all depends on what the application and what the service is going to be. What 5G functions and use cases are so dependent on virtualization then? Which network slicing, intelligent edge, when might we start to see these in commercial operation, and how dependent upon NFV, and what state of NFV infrastructure needs to be in place?
Well, when it comes to use cases, let me say one thing. I think that there is a main and basic use case that this is about the sustainability of the network infrastructure. It's something that right now the pressure on the one hand, on the higher and higher demand of, even if we're talking about sheer bandwidth, nothing more than it, is something that is pushing, this famous curve in the moment that the costs and the revenues will cross. And precisely one of the few weapons that we have left is precisely having unifying infrastructure and having everything managed and sharing that infrastructure, even prolonging somehow the lifetime of the infrastructure by reusing it for lower priority or lower demanding, or less demanding services. So this is, and I think this is essential, because otherwise the network infrastructures will become not sustainable. Apart from that, well, if you take this at the beginning, any use case you can think of as requiring this, I tend to believe that in any case, if we're talking about particular ones, there are several, let's say, unexplored territories that are related precisely with industrial services and whatever it has been right now, the domain of very local networks that were not interconnected widely or globally, in which precisely without virtualization probably it would be very complicated to get in.
So I think when I think of use cases from a 5G perspective that could be one of the first that gets deployed, I think of cloud gaming. So typically, it's always been, the media formats, the multiple media formats, the large data files, they've always been transcoded and processed in the cloud, rendered remotely. But increasingly, we're seeing, especially for online gaming, if they want lower latency, it's moving towards the edge. And I think cloud gaming is going to be one of those first use cases that gets deployed at the edge for lower latency. And there are, a large number of gamers out there that will want those fast response times. And I think you'll start to see more of cloud gaming being deployed with 5G.
For us, it's relatively easy. So the first use case is normal broadband, sort of a bit more of what everybody knows already. On the other hand, we see very good discussions, let's say, with anything which is sort of a bit more mission critical, from blue light organizations to train type of things, where today you have a dedicated network. So with a slice, there's pretty much of a business case. If you can handle a sort of a dedicated network and replace it with a slice, I think the business case is easy to calculate.
Jen?
Yeah, I'm puzzled to hear the business case is easy, because as far as the edge is concerned, the business case is not that easy, and we struggle to find the use cases. You quoted gaming, but maybe it's the IoT, but which vertical specifically? Because IoT is quite vague, quite enormous range. So probably we need a few specific use cases and specific verticals to make it happen from the economic standpoint, and to justify this business case to deploy to the edge, which obviously is needed if we talk about the latency, if we talk about new classes of service or new profile of service we need in the infrastructure. So From my standpoint, I think it's today this tricky point, whereas the enhanced mobile broadband is quite obvious and will be probably the first stage as soon as the frequencies are sold by the states. Obviously,
at a reasonable price.
At a reasonable price. Sure.
Reasonable price indeed. Domenico.
Yeah. First thing first, the standards have been closed a few months back, right? Few weeks back, actually. So, a couple of things. First thing, I don't think that any mobile operator is planning to decommission any legacy network because 5G is introduced. So I will go back to what Diego was saying. I mean, my point of view is that we need to find the economical sustainability of this new technology. The economical sustainability comes from an operational excellence that we need to pursue, because the model that we had in the past will not make it sustainable for the future, will not make sustainable another technology according to the way to operate we are used to. So this is a fact, okay? So before looking at the use cases, we need to look even at the cost structure and at the efficiency that we are having managing this new technology. But then there is another thing that is happening in parallel, right? It's more related to the regulators, to the auction of the spectrum. So in my country, I'm Italian, so in my country, last week, mobile operators ended up paying billions to the government for the spectrum, right? So I expect that this will accelerate the process as well, because it's cash that is going out of the industry, and we need all together to work to accelerate, the return on this huge investment that is done in these days.
Marcus.
Probably two words on two comments I was hearing here. So that the edge, I was not referring to anything edge. I think you were referring more to the gaming part, because I mean, as Swisscom and as a small country and a small operator, we are the edge. So it's not like that big of a deal. So for our NFV is already an edge deployment, you can say. The second point is really also a Swiss phenomena, is on the regulatory side, but more not the frequency as such, but the electromagnetic emissions. So we have a massive issue on that, in at least in Switzerland. I think Italy is a bit in the same league on some of that.
When something becomes in fashion, it becomes in fashion everywhere. Yeah. Yes.
So the issue there is really there. We might really reform spectrum, because 5G is expected to be much more efficient than 2G with the same energy we can blow into the air. So there is a case for reforming or turning off some barriers, some systems, and so on.
Right, let's go back to the audience. Who wants to join in the fun? Who's got? Oh, there's a comment in the front row here. Again, if you could just stand up, I'll just come behind you and just hold that there. You should say your name and company for everyone. That'd be great.
Hi, good evening. I'm Manish Singh from Tech Mahindra, and my question to the panel is: for 5G, is virtualization enough, or do we need to go beyond and start to look even further disaggregation, containerization, etc.? And building on that, do you see the industry is trending in the right direction, or are we swinging the pendulum back towards vertical virtualization, or as you said today, fake virtualization?
Thanks, Manish. I think Manish has been reading my question list here, because I've got those exact questions coming up. Oh, this is a good one. Who wants to?
Thanks for quoting me, by the way. Yeah, I think it's worth going beyond virtualization and going to containers and so on, but for sure it's the cloud native stage, so it's of course the end promise that we will have at this end. But nevertheless, I'm quite convinced that it's not feasible, it's not realistic, and it's not the benefit of the ecosystem to try to leapfrog to the container advent without industrializing the current stage with let's say pure VM, or such. So,
Diego.
It's just a word of warning that, this industry consumes buzzwords as people watching the Super Bowl consume buffalo wings. It's something that we, it's amazing because you think about, no, virtualization is not enough. Well, come on, virtualization, if we talk about making something based on software that can move around and live in a software-based environment, that's a VM, that's a container, that's a serverless thing, that's whatever. From time to time, I would like to see a little bit more stability in our terminology, not in the technology, because from time to time we fall to this temptation of saying, no, this is not the thing. The new thing is this other thing that I will call S, Y, and Z, because it's dangerous. For example, this particular thing, this particular aspect about the fake virtualization, I remember there was a presentation from a colleague of yours some time ago complaining about that precisely. They called them that in the moment it was vertical integration and horizontal integration, something like that. This was Christos, what's his name? Christos Kolias. And it was something that we perceived from the beginning. It's something that, well, for sure, there is a pushback. And it's a natural one because you are defending your investments. It's not that there are evil vendors and nice and good operators. That is true, on the other hand. but it's not about that right now. It's simply that I can understand if you have been spending resources for 10 years to build a software base, develop it, run it on a particular hardware, on a particular style, and ways of optimizing, etc. And somebody comes and says, no, forget about it, you have to make it cloud native. Well, first, you're going to lose your competitive advantage. And second, probably you are going to deliver much poorer products for a while. So you do what I would say are legitimate tricks. And well, more or less try to satisfy and move slower than it would be desirable. That's natural, on the other hand. So, well, I think this is part of the, let's say, of the evolution of technology and in an industry. Don't forget it. Networking industry is quite mature right now. We are providing an amazing service. An amazing and sustained service worldwide. And this is something that, well, we have to be careful.
Okay, let's hear from the vendors.
No, I tend to agree that people who are having more an IT culture or a cloud culture are looking at something more than virtualization to happen. And I agree, so it will happen, but it will take time. It will take time because 4 years ago we were thinking that VNF were going to be deployed in 6 months, 9 months, and whoever was speaking about appliance was, like the Flintstone, was a guy coming from a couple of centuries back, right? While today there is a lot of fake virtualization, and each of us probably would be happy to see more real virtualized stuff in the network. So I believe that these things will happen, but it will take time. Trying to push these too strong or try to put these as a must-have in order to start is not going to help the industry. The industry needs to start proving the benefit of a more open, less monolithic type of network and architecture, and then things will come on their own afterward.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what our three colleagues here said. I do believe that, we have too many buzzwords because I think sometimes we've been asked, should I completely discard NFV? Should I just restart with cloud native? And you realize that that's not possible. I think it's going to be extremely use case dependent. It's going to be dependent on the maturity of which part of the network, maturity of the customer themselves, who's deploying the network, and for the end customer. And also, depending on the particular type of use case, they might coexist. You might have a continuum where, bare metal, NFV, cloud native, they all kind of coexist in order to, deliver upon kind of the promise of I think one of my colleagues was mentioning like a disaggregated horizontal cloud.
Marcus?
Yeah, so I think I should start with a story when I joined the ETSI NFV discussion in one of the first meetings. I said, gosh, what are these guys talking about? Virtualization, that's already sort of a years old type of stuff. Now we go into telecom space. On the way, I realized that the telecom industry was just not able to adopt anything more cloud native from the very start. And there are good reasons, there are good features in the virtualization part, which we need. So I think it's going to be a sort of a dual or both things. I mean, there are certain applications, certain use cases which need a much more cloud native, much more a platform type of approach, where other use cases need a much more virtualization type of setup because of isolation, because of security, because of
it's
other
not
features.
just because it's not, at the end of the day, it's not just the way you develop the software, right? It's not just the way you write the network function. At the end of the day, there is an impact on the operational processes. There is an impact on the people. It requires completely different skills. So it's a huge transformation. It's a huge business transformation for the telco industry. So it's not just to adopt Docker rather than OpenStack or whatever else religious battle we want to take on a single technology, right?
And even the cloud providers, it coexists even for the cloud providers. They're not completely cloud native. They have, other virtualized, or more OpenStack-like environments, and they have, kind of the containerized Kubernetes type of environment. So it's not one or the other, even with the cloud providers.
Yeah, and I don't think we should discriminate 5G against other use cases, fixed one that we already apply to the B2B business, for example. I think it's the same question. The discrimination is by the use case and the agility that it brings along, but not by the technology or the access type. Is it 5G? Is it fixed?